As youth are learning the essentials of reading and writing, there are tutors and literacy resources to help them master the essential components of literacy. Joining us to discuss this is Saabi Muhammad, Literacy Education Specialist. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Sabira. How are you doing today?
Walaikum salam. I'm well. Thank you for having me.
First, thank you for joining us. Now we're going to jump right into our first question. What motivated you to become a literacy education specialist?
Well, I am a 10-year educator and I have worked in K through 12. And unfortunately, I have worked with students in the upper grades who were considered non-readers, which is absolutely heartbreaking. And I believe and we know that literacy is a human right. Being able to read and express yourself and gain knowledge is absolutely a human right. So I decided once I had children and experience success with um, developing those skills with my daughter, that I would create a place where others can gain resources to build that skill of being able to read and comprehend and write, and so thus emerged Endurance Literacy Center.
Wow, yes, ma'am, that is so beautiful. So, what are the essential components of literacy, and how can literacy resources help young learners improve and master literacy?
Well, there's so much that really goes into literacy, but we start on a very basic level with phonics, phonemic awareness, and then we move into fluency, being able, to read in a fluent manner. Then you can move into comprehension, being able to understand what it is that you're reading. You go from in the early ages being reading, learning to read, and then it transitions to reading in order to learn. And so we move into comprehension and then, of course, writing. So I would say those are the basics. Within phonics, there is a lot, but that is pretty much the basis of literacy, those four components.
Yes, ma'am. So, my mother is actually a teacher. She's not a literacy expert, but I have witnessed her teach students and work with them on how to read and their comprehension skills. So, I really think that's beautiful. I absolutely love what you're doing. Next question. How do you engage a student that is lacking motivation or confidence in their reading and writing ability?
Definitely, it's important to meet students where they are, meet children where they are, and give them the ability for success. So when you are, or I am, engaging students in text, I want to make sure that the text that I provide is a text that they can feel successful with. So that way we can move on to things more challenging. And also, it's important to explicitly teach children the things we want them to know. We can't assume that they know anything. We have to make it clear what it is, the skills that they're learning. So if I want a child to understand that when there is, and usually when there is an E at the end of a word, that E translates to make the vowel a long sound. I need to explicitly state that. And so those are some of the things that we do. I also make sure that I give them reading material that interests them. You have to start with making sure that they're interested in what they're reading, and then giving them reflections of themselves also, giving them texts and authors that are Black men and women, so that way they can feel some sort of agency in the things that they are learning.
Yes, ma'am. Which brings us right along to our next question. How did the Brilliant Black Boys Book Club come about? And has the Brilliant Black Boys Book Club helped improve reading proficiency of Black male students who are statistically at the bottom of the reading proficiency?
That's a great question. I had parents come to me. That's usually how it starts. Parents came to me over the summer and were, especially because of the abrupt end of last school year and moving to the virtual, they were concerned about, the amount of screen time that their children were engaging in, the decline, or I would say, decline in some of the skills that they had learned. And so parents came to me with those concerns and emerged the Brilliant Black Boys Book Club, where it was a chance for young boys to get together and just engage in reading. getting a chance to see each other, to have some a social time where it wasn't necessarily extremely academic, or there weren't anything tied to that time in terms of like grades or stress. It really was just a time to unwind and be with each other and engage in a text. And they have loved it. I have heard from parents that they really enjoyed that time. The boys constantly. I recently had a baby, so I had to pause it. But they are, reaching out to me often, like, when is it starting back up? We miss it. And it was boys from all over the country, which was a great way for them to meet each other as well.
That's beautiful. Yes, ma'am. First off, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I love the idea of having a book club. Now, are majority of the young children that you work with, are they majority males? Is that why you started a boys book club? Do you also work with young girls as well?
I do. I work with boys and girls. As you mentioned earlier, oftentimes our Black boys are forgotten about. They fall through the cracks. So I receive a lot more inquiries from parents of Black boys who want to make sure that their son is not getting left behind, or that they are set up for success in terms of being prepared for the next school year, or if they're struggling. Making sure that they are able to kind of close the gaps that we see. So I would say a lot of my tutoring is with young Black males, but as a teacher, I work with both. I work with boys and girls, and have also worked with adult learners as well.
Oh, okay. Yes, ma'am. So I know that the selection of books matter. Some people are interested in different types of books. But what types of books would you encourage a young reader to start reading?
I would encourage readers to start reading things that they're interested in, especially at a young age. You want to build that curiosity. You want to build the love for learning, mostly. And so I would encourage parents to really pay attention to the things that their children are interested in, and grab material that is centered in those things. If your child is interested in architecture, space, if your child is interested in Black people, history, really delving into those things. Animals. I have a student who is obsessed with animals. And so whenever I, can get material for him, I'm making sure that it's animal based, things that he would love to learn. And also pick up in their downtime. You don't want to feel like you're forcing a child to read, because that can have an adverse effect. So making sure that you're finding materials that they're interested in, I think, would be of the utmost importance. You can hear my son in the background.
That's okay. That's okay. But all right, yes, ma'am. And so what about those? I heard you say that you also been working with some adults as well. How do you encourage them? Because I know they're a little farther along down the line, and younger children are more inclined to trying new things and wanting to learn.
Yeah.
But as an adult, how are you able to encourage them to improve their literacy skills or even their writing skills?
Well, we know that 10 to 20% of America's population is functionally illiterate, meaning they can get by, but they don't necessarily have the skills to really maximize their learning potential in terms of what they're able to access based on their reading skills. So it can be a difficult challenge to really find adults who are willing to admit that they may not necessarily know how to read and write at the level that they should. And so my work with adult learners, I worked in an adult literacy program where adults were, going to get their high school diploma. But I have also worked with adults who maybe come to me on the side, who know the work that I do and want to privately seek help. And so those are really the channels, the avenues. It really takes a courageous adult to be able to say, I need help in this area, because it can be embarrassing, to have gone through, and it really shouldn't be an embarrassment personally. It's an embarrassment to our schooling system that has allowed, so many men and women to go through and get to a point in adulthood where they can admit, I don't really know how to read or write. So that has been my experience. It's usually kind of a secret underground work, unless I'm involved in a program that is specifically catered to those things.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, now moving on to our last question.
Mhm.
As students and teachers gravitate towards computers, many schools no longer teach students cursive writing. So how important is it for youth to write well? And what resources are available at Endurance Literacy Center to help students improve their writing?
It is extremely important to be able to write well, in order to, completely express yourself. But it's also important that we have handwriting that looks good as well. The minister has talked about his handwriting, and even in writing our letter, that process, and how important handwriting is. It's extremely important. At Endurance Literacy Center, I actually have notebooks that I created with taking it back to the basics for our youngest learners, but the lined paper with the broken lines, and making sure they understand what letters go to the top line, should stop at the middle line, go below the bottom line. All those things are important in my classroom, or even when I'm teaching. I'm old school. You write that over, do it again. That's important that they understand that, especially in reading and writing, your first time doing it is not usually the best. Writing is a process of revision, and it can always improve. And so having children and learners understand that is extremely important. Um, and I also offer writing tutoring. And I haven't had any tutoring in cursive, but I do believe it is a skill that is quickly fading among in the schooling system. But definitely manuscript and composing, how to compose a writing. And I do that for adults as well who are in school and continuing their education for their writing purposes.
Yes, ma'am. I know that I could also probably improve my handwriting. I've been told I write like a doctor.
Funny. I know exactly what that means.
Yes. Now, do you have social media that we can follow you on? Do you have a website that we can visit to book a session with you?
Absolutely. So on Instagram, I am Mrs. MRS. Saabi, Saabi. I'm also on Facebook, and you can visit my website at enduranceliteracycenter.com. You can book a one-on-one tutoring session. You can reach out to me for any questions about how to, get your child reading. I specialize in accelerated literacy development. So if you have a child, they know their ABCs, and you're like, what next? Definitely reach out to me. You can email me through my website, and I'd be happy to help.
Yes, ma'am. And are you also doing Zoom sessions as well?
Yes. So I all my tutoring is virtual right now. So it is through Zoom. But I also, and this is a plug, but I also am a teacher at Muhammad University of Islam, DC. And we are currently open for enrollment for the 2021-22 school year. So if you're looking for education for your children as well, definitely look us up.
Yes, ma'am. Well, on behalf of NV News, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Now let us pause for announcements from our sponsors. When we return, NNV Weekly contributor Charles Muhammad will be on for the How to Eat to Live segment to talk about how to live a long life. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Nyah Muhammad with NNVnews.com.
How to Eat to Live advised us what we should eat to bring about a return to perfection and long life, like Noah and Methuselah, who lived nearly 1,000 years. Joining us is NNV Weekly contributor Charles Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Charles. How are you doing today?
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. It's wonderful to have this discussion with you.
Yes, ma'am.
So my first question for you is, we're going to recap the plants we are prohibited from eating: beans, greens, and nuts from last show.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Yes, sir. So what are some of the foods that we are prohibited from eating?
Well, in How to Eat to Live, both books, 1 and 2, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad specifically talks about not eating certain beans, peas, greens, and nuts. Now, we are to eat the small white navy bean, but he does say in many occasions that the other beans, he called them butter beans, lima beans, horse beans, those are for cattle. Those beans are strong enough to bust our bellies. They're actually called belly busters. Then we went on into the greens, while they're not good, in the nuts. You could just recap on the last video. But on page 74, book number 2, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says some very interesting things in regards to that. He says many of these, he's talking about fruits and vegetables, are not injurious to our health. Now, we still have to stop right there. Not injurious, meaning that there are other fruits and vegetables that can be injurious to our health, that can injure us as we eat them. Because right now we're in a movement, which is the plant-based movement, where we think that all plants are edible, and those that are edible are good for us. Not all of them are good for us. And then he goes on to say that they are vegetarians, talking about those who only eat fruits and vegetables, and they live a long time. Those who do not go after the wrong kinds of fruits and vegetables. So there are the wrong kinds of fruits and vegetables that if you want to live a long life, you can't just go vegetarian and think that you can eat any type of fruit and vegetable and it keep you healthy. Now, on page 52, he says that Allah desires to extend our lives from a short span of averaging 62 years to a span of 1,000 years, or for as long as we desire to live. Now, I love this aspect of it because it challenges us as followers of Elijah Muhammad to prove that we can live 1,000 years scientifically.
Yes, sir. So where is the science that backs up what Mr. Muhammad taught?
Well, we could go, I don't know if Barnes and Nobles are around anymore, but they have lots of books on the subject of living long. Now, there's a book, Lifespan, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. These books go into the root of aging and getting older, or the body suffering from diseases and sicknesses. And it's on a cellular level. And you can see the multitude of cells that are in the body that need certain vitamins and nutrients and other, even sunlight, proper water. And that comes from our food. So if you eat the right foods, you will continue to give the body what it needs to rebuild itself. Because now they are not hiding the science anymore. They're helping the Elijah Muhammad, proving that the body can rebuild itself and rebuild itself to be just like it is when you were a young 16-year-old. They asked the question, does the human body really replace itself every 7 years? Well, it's in between the 7 and 8. 8 is also a number that's symbolic of infinity. So when you want to learn how to rebuild yourself when you eat your food, you have to learn what happens in the body for cells to replace dying old or cells that are acting improperly and become cancerous. And that process is called mitosis, where cells are one cell and they divide into two cells. The old cell tells the new cell what the program is, what we're supposed to be doing. That old cell then dies off and then goes out and is casted out when the new cell takes its place. That's sort of like what we do in our education system. We bring in new children at the first grade level and we educate them, and then we move them up to the second grade, and then the first graders come in. That's how the body continues to keep itself brand new. But there is a breakdown in that process.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for sharing that. I believe it's very important to understand what happens inside of our bodies so that we understand why it's important to eat the right food to live a long life. So my next question is, how does Mr. Muhammad explain this 1,000 years of living concept?
Well, he goes in and out of it in his books on how to eat to live. And he has a very unique way of teaching us. He gives us many books. There's a book called Our Savior Has Arrived, and then that monumental book called The Message to the Black Man in America, where he talks about the black man's germ and the brown germ. That is his terminology. That's the terminology he was using in the 1930s and 40s up until he departed in the 1970s. But that germ, the word germ, can be replaced with the word cell. The cell of the black man, the cell of the brown man. That's how people talked back then, in the cell of the white man. So you're really talking about germ warfare or cellular warfare. So we have to protect 37 trillion or more cells in our body. They're constantly dying off and new cells are coming in. So we have to be aware of this. So that makes us more cognizant of what we want to eat. So the problem is with our cells is that they degenerate, right? We don't want that type of degeneration. Degeneration deals with when the cells become injured, and the cells become injured for when we eat improperly and they're not getting their proper sustenance, so they begin to break down. And when your skin cells begin to break down and can't hold on to one another with what they call collagen, they begin to sag and you see wrinkles. So that's why the Elijah Muhammad used the terminology of the germ and rejuvenating the body by eliminating certain foods out of your body, out of your diet, because he says bad food causes you to look old.
Yes, sir. Now, are there any other causes of aging?
Well, yes. Even in this plant-based so-called movement, they are putting in a lot of elements of the plants that really shouldn't be in the human diet. So, like these plant oils. Now, they take cotton seeds. You know how they pick cotton and there's seeds left over? They press those seeds and make cotton oil. Those seeds in that process of making that oil causes inflammation. Now, anyone who studied our beloved brother, Dr. Saabi's science and his philosophy, he talks about mucus and inflammation. And when you have a lot of inflammation, you have a lot of mucus. And that mucus, the Elijah Muhammad had a term for it called poison. So all foods have a certain amount of poison in it. I don't care how healthy you think that food is. There's certain components of it that do not belong in the human body, and the human body wants to cast it out, and it has to cause a certain level of inflammation, mucus to control it, to cast it out. The other thing is that on the cellular level, when the cells want to divide and recreate themselves, they have these little components in their chromosomes called telomeres. Now, this is the new discovery in the science community, that on these chromosomes, the telomeres are at the tips of the chromosomes, and every time a cell divides and creates a new cell, the telomeres on the new cell get shorter and shorter. And when you get to a certain point of constantly dividing cells and creating new cells, those telomeres get too short to where they can't recreate themselves properly anymore. So the new cells begin to deteriorate and degenerate, and then you get the malfunction, and then cancers can become more possible, and other systems begin to break down. People get disease quickly.
Yes, sir. So I heard you mention something along the lines of every food has a certain amount of poison in it. Was that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So how can you rid yourself of this poison?
Well, the Elijah Muhammad teaches us that fasting is the best way. And doctors know that is better than all of the medications that they can give us. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he said that fasting is the best way for us to remove these poisons that build up in the body and cause ailments like high blood pressure, diabetes, hypertension, arthritis, those diseases of that nature.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So what are the scientists saying about living longer?
Well, even in the pop culture, I remember watching a movie called Deep Blue Sea with the rapper LL Cool J, and I found that this movie was very interesting because it was a black man survived to the end of the movie. But this I don't think is characterized as science fiction. It's characterized as an action movie. And in that movie, the base plot of the movie is that these people were doing experiments on sharks, because sharks have what are called unique set of stem cells. And these stem cells are cells that are really for rejuvenation. It's almost like you're a toddler or a young shark your whole life. And sharks have abundance of them. So they were trying to study how to take that process from the sharks and get them into humans. And so the stem cell has many applications. Humans still produce stem cells, but as you age, it gets lower and lower. And these stem cells are able to mimic red blood cells, nerve cells, muscle cells. So what they want to do is try to get these stem cells to revitalize people suffering from dementia, Alzheimer's, poor memory loss. So they want to use that to rebuild the mind. So that is the science that's backing up the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that if you fast, now when we fast, the body tends to produce more stem cells, and these stem cells like to find their way where they're most needed. But here, the scientists are trying to artificially replicate that process.
Wow, yes, sir. I'd never heard of that movie before, and I had never really looked too deep into that idea of stem cells either. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
That was really enlightening. What are some examples of a long lifespan in modern society?
Well, yes, ma'am. Long lifespans is relative, but let's take a look at three creatures, for instance. They're sharks, like we discussed before, have a high stem cell content. Now, sharks, they're not vegetarians. They're vicious carnivores, right? Then you have the jellyfish. Now, jellyfish is a predator. They have these tentacles that capture their food, like little fish, they eat krill or plankton, and they electrify them. They actually produce electric shock. And then you have the lobster. Now, lobsters are bottom feeders, right? They eat the defecation of the oceans and lakes and seas. Matter of fact, lobsters are so toxic that they weren't a delicacy years ago. They were fertilizer for plants. So they're like watery manure in a sense. But now the image has changed, and now they're like the pinnacle of the highlight. But the reason why I brought up these animals, the variants of their diet, they all live longer than humans. And the lobster, in a sense, is almost an immortal. They say that lobsters can live a long time, is that they crush themselves in their own shells. They have an exoskeleton, and they actually shed their old skeletons as they age. But at some point in time, they stop shedding their skeletons, and they actually suffocate in their shells. Jellyfish are also creatures that are considered immortal. They don't know their exact lifespan. They just keep going on and on and on, I guess, until they come across a squid. They're just tired of them shocking them, and the squid will eat them. And shark, they also have their own natural enemies, like the whale and the killer whale and man, but they have a long lifespan, but their lifespan is maybe closer to 100 years old.
Yes, sir. So why should we believe that it's possible for anyone to live to be 1,000 years old?
Oh, I'm sorry. I also forgot to talk about our friend, the tortoise.
Okay.
Bowhead whale. They live 200 years. But to answer your question, why should we believe that anyone can live 1,000 years? I know it sounds like fantastic foolishness, but if you read some books and you see what these scientists are coming up, they are predicting the end of aging, to whereas they want to get that exact formula to whereas they could either give you a pill or a treatment. They want to sell it to you to where they could stop you from aging. Now, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan promised us that if we practice how to eat to live, we can reverse aging and eating how to eat to live in this proper way, right? And if we fast, the way the Honorable Muhammad taught us, we won't have certain sicknesses. So it's Mr. Muhammad's way or these scientists' way that want to sell you their solution, sort of like an elixir. But the key here, and I guess we're coming to the crescendo, is our sister Henrietta Lacks. Now, Oprah Winfrey did a movie sort of this sister who lived in the, she passed away, I believe, in 1951 from cervical cancer. While she was receiving treatment, unbeknownst to her, doctors took samples of her cells. They're called HeLa cells. Now they stole them. You know, I'm not being libelous here or slandering. They stole her cells without her knowing about it and began to experiment on them. And they call her cells immortal cells because her cells duplicate themselves to perfection. To this day, they have come up with almost thousands of medications based on her HeLa cells. Now, the key here is that her cells reproduce themselves without deterioration, without degeneration or variation. So imagine that happening in our human bodies, all of our cells duplicate themselves to where we're 100 years old and we still look as good as we do now. That is what the Honorable Muhammad promised, and our Savior has arrived, that Allah will have us looking as if we were 16 years old. We may have a few wrinkles, some gray hairs and a missing tooth here and there, but Sister Henrietta Lacks, her cells prove that there is an immortality factor to the human being. And 1,000 years may seem far off. Some of us may not want to live to be 1,000, but 200 is well within the possibility. We got animals that live to be 200. But I would like to give Mr. Muhammad what he promised us, which is 140 years if we eat one meal a day, the proper foods, and fast regularly on a monthly basis. That is the proof that you can live to be 1,000 years and look good too.
Yes, sir. I just absolutely love how science can be used to prove the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. Praise be to Allah. Now, thank you so much, Brother Charles, for joining us today. It was truly a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine, sister. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. And thank you all for joining us today and tuning into National Network View News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Nyah Tsai with National Network View News.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Classes begin September 1st. To enroll, visit AsiaticMinds.com.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.